All right, great. All right, the hour of 6:30 having arrived, I'd like to call to order the City of Columbus Regular Plan Commission meeting for Thursday, June 9th, 2022. Kyle, will you please call the roll?
Monday.
Present.
Albright.
Present.
Myers.
Present.
Motif is excused. Traxler.
Here.
Baston.
Here.
Thielen.
Tyler.
Sorry.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Item 3 on your agenda is notice of open meeting. This meeting's been posted in accordance with state law in the appropriate way. I see Kyle nodding his head. Great. Item 4, approve the agenda. Your agendas are in front of you in your packets. Please review them. I'll entertain a motion to use this as is or amend.
Motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, this will be our working agenda for this evening. Item 5, approved minutes from May 12th, 22 Plan Commission meeting. Those also are in your packet. Please take a moment to review, and I'll entertain a motion to approve or amend.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the May 12th, 2022 Plan Commission meeting.
Albright will second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Minutes from May are approved. All right. Item 6, opportunity for citizen comment. I see we have somebody in the room here. Are you the applicant for the item under number 8? Okay. Kyle, did you receive any by email?
No, there was no
Mail?
comments received.
Great. All right. Item 7, unfinished business. Nothing appears under there on our agenda. And we had something stricken from last month, but that is off the table for now.
Yeah, there's nothing new to be considered tonight.
Great. All right, moving on to item 8, new business. We have 8A, public hearing. Review the request of Hunter Frank for a conditional use permit to operate a home occupation at 259 Oak Street. All right. I will open the public hearing. Kyle, will you present the item and then we'll move through it?
Yes. So what you have before you in the packet in the staff report is the application and associated materials from Hunter Frank at 259 Oak Street. Essentially, he would like to have a home-based occupation offering firearm sales, ammunition sales, gunsmithing, archery services, and then other miscellaneous firearm and hunting-related accessories for sale. He would also offer private firearms for sale and require the purchaser to complete a background check. Single employee to start with. If it becomes more successful, they will double their employees and add his wife to the operation as well. The visitors that he's anticipating should not be an issue. It will leave the right-of-way completely empty because of the parking spots they have available in their driveway, and they're anticipating less than one person per day in most instances, with a peak of no more than 3 visitations per day, which is well within the requirements. The application does appear to comply with the requirements. I did list the standards for home-based occupation further in the memo. Based on the staff review, we feel that the applicant has discussed or demonstrated compliance with all of the requirements, with the exception potentially of item number 2 regarding the sales of items only produced by the home occupation. And that's something that the Plan Commission should evaluate and determine if each of the proposed occupational activities meet that standard, such as consignment sales of firearms and hunting accessory, as well as ammunition sales. And again, item 2 requires or states that on-site sales are limited. No article is sold or offered for sale on the premises except that produced by such occupation. So that was something that we feel that when deliberation comes, the Plan Commission should evaluate that. I did also then further on indicate which the permit conditions could be considered. And in 2020, we had a similar firearms dealer that came through, and I listed the 5 requirements that were listed there, which is essentially, that was approved with all the requirements in 114-106, which is just previously listed. They did exclude the ability to display a sign. Firearms at that time had to be kept in a safe or other secure location. There was a requirement for a security system, and the applicant could hold no more than 5 firearms waiting for pickup at any given time. And those were sort of specific to his operation and how he was going to be operating his business. So not all of them may make perfect sense in this application. And then after that is all of the check boxes, which is according to the code, in order to recommend this conditional use for approval, the Plan Commission will have to find that each of these items is true regarding the conditional use. And so if there is a motion to approve later on, these conditions should be referenced as part of the approval. So overall, the staff recommendation, this does seem to be a well thought out and well planned application. It seems like it's reasonable that it should work in the way that that it's stated, although you never quite know when they get in operation. We have a history of approving occupations like this before. This is slightly more extensive than that one, so that's worth noting. And the commission should consider if the variety of business-like activities proposed compromises the use, enjoyment, comfort, or general welfare of others in the neighborhood. If you find that they comply with the home occupation requirements, you evaluate any conditions and establish some or none for the permit, and then you find those required elements. Staff recommend approving the conditional use permit.
Thanks, Kyle. Sorry, I almost called you Matt. I didn't. All right. Usually at this time, we have the applicant be invited to say a few words. If you have anything to add or clarify, we do have your narrative in the packet here and a copy of your application, so you're welcome to speak or not as you please.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have a whole lot to speak on. I'm
Okay.
certainly willing to answer questions. I know it's kind of a hot topic, so I don't know if that's really the kind of discussion to have at this meeting. But
Yeah, if you have something to speak, step to the microphone, and then when we ask questions, I'll have you at the microphone too. But if you choose to forego all that, that's fine too.
Yeah, like I said, I don't really have anything specific to say. I'm more than willing to answer any questions. So I guess that's what I have.
Okay.
Are you able to bring up the property on the display?
Sure.
The document?
The very last page had an overhead. It's a little bit from the county website. But
Yeah.
Okay. And then being a public hearing, we'll invite members of the public to speak. There aren't any here. Are there any online?
this meeting is in person.
Oh, wow. We've come all the way back. Okay, great. Okay. Well, I'll ask if any members of the public wish to speak. I'll ask a second time if there are any members of the public wishing to speak. And for a third and final time, any members of the public wishing to speak.
Where the driveway is or something?
Okay. Hearing none, I'll move forward with closing the public hearing portion and move on to item 8B, which is review and make recommendation to council by the Plan Commission. So I will open up for plan commissioners' discussion and questions.
So I have a question. So what kind of security system do you plan on having? What are you going to be storing the firearms, ammunition, and any other equipment in your home?
So the business is going to be based out of my garage, which is a detached structure. It is locked using standard garage security. Within that garage, the previous owner had constructed a soundproof room, which is fireproof, double drywall paneled. It has a solid wood door that will have a numpad lock on it, and I'm also going to be putting a deadbolt with a separate key on it as well. And as far as the FFL requirements to get the federal firearms license, you also have to go through an agreement stating that you will have firearm locks in use on the weapons that you have at your facility. So that will also be verified by someone from the ATF to make sure that's within
Are
compliance.
you going to have any kind of video?
I do plan on having video. The previous owner also had the wiring and fixtures for security cameras. That's all installed. He took the security cameras with him when he left.
Okay.
So I'm presuming that's going to be a very quick and easy reinstall if the whole permit goes accordingly.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah.
I felt like the teacher called.
Sorry,
on
we
somebody
were
who's
trying to figure
talking
out
during
what
class.
some of the map.
Those right here, we're trying to figure what those were. Those were trees.
Yes,
Tree shadows,
yes,
yes.
okay.
I did have a question for the applicant. You had mentioned that, or somebody, I think Kyle mentioned that you'd be doing background checks. How do you perform those? What do you use?
I will not have access to that until I get ATF licensing and permission to do so. So they go through, as part of the FFL process, someone from the ATF comes out to your house and does a 3-hour interview, and it's sort of a, feeling each other out and training process. So unfortunately, I don't have any of that knowledge yet, but that is all part of the training that comes with that.
I would think it's a pretty structured process, I would think.
They're pretty secretive about it until that point, so unfortunately, I can't really speak.
So what has to happen first? Do you have to have approval to do this before you can get your ATF approvals?
Correct, yep. I've been in contact with an ATF agent because I filled out the formal application. I did fingerprinting with Columbus Police Department and all of that, and the hang up on the FFL is making sure you're in compliance with zoning and other regulations, so I have to wait until I get a permit before they will proceed.
Okay. Thank you.
Other commissioners? Questions? I have a kind of a question for Kyle. So I appreciate the research that you did on the 2020 conditional use permit. Can you remind me, or do you know, if ammunition was part of that home business?
I don't believe ammunition was. I believe it was
Okay.
more of a gun manufacturing, gunsmithing sort of operation.
Right, I remember there was service, I remember there was consignment, I didn't remember if there were other things. So I guess what I'm working through is the standards for home-based occupation that you brought up, that item 2, the limitation for on-site sales. It appears that the intent of this sort of provision in the code is to allow for things like, I don't know, baked goods, home manufactured goods, home service, right? Services, things like that. I guess ostensibly anybody that has any kind of eBay or similar thing, they're similarly consignment sales, right? Whatever it might be, firearms or otherwise, right? So I think that sort of gets a pass, so to speak. I would think that purchased pass-through sales of ammunition or purchased pass-through sales of other accessories might not quite meet that definition. I think it would be different if if again it were consignment of these accessories or a resale. I think it would be different if you did say reloading, right? Anyway, so those are some of my thoughts. I think there's a lot of different items here. Certainly everything is related to one another. So that's kind of what I'm working through in my head.
You're right. I don't recall ammunition sales as part of that previous one either.
Okay.
It was kind of specific to, yeah, the gunsmithing, and that's why there was a limited amount of firearms too, is there were very specific purchases, you know, from across the country,
Right.
and he would handle them and he would then pass them on.
Right.
So it was a very
Right.
small amount of sales specific to the way he was operating. Yeah.
Right, okay. I was shocked to see that was 2020 already, so time
Yeah.
flies.
Right.
Can you give us an idea of how many firearms you might be handling at one time?
I can't necessarily say at this time. I'm presuming it's going to be extremely limited if it's completely funded by me.
Sure.
Because I'm obviously not a big box store, but
Right, okay.
depending on, you know, if you were operating off of consignments and you had somebody that did a lifetime of collecting and says, hey, none of my children are interested in this sort of thing, I want them to fall into the right hands as opposed to the wrong hands,
Sure,
that would be kind of hard to say, but I'm flexible with those sorts of things. I think that's why a home-based FFL is a good thing, because nowadays there's really nowhere to dispose of firearms. It's kind of one of those things that, I don't want to say it's taboo, but I mean, you can't put them on Facebook, you can't put them on Craigslist for obvious reasons, and I've had, I guess to get a little off topic, my grandfather passed away about 2 months ago, and he operated an FFL out of Beaver Dam, and through closing out his estate, it became very obvious to me that as one of the only home-based FFLs in that community, he had a pretty decent flow of traffic through his business. And we had several people that were of older age that would come and, you know, stop by thinking we were still in business and say, hey, you know, I have this assortment of guns that I'd like to get rid of. Can you help me? And it ended up being a no, because I don't have any training or qualifications to do so. And then where do they go is
Sure.
kind of the problem.
okay,
So
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So my husband and I shoot, so if something happened to us and our kids didn't go, I mean, so you could potentially looking at, you know, just a normal homeowner that has maybe even 10 guns, whether they're shotguns, deer rifles, whatever.
Yep.
So that's what you're looking to do. And so how are you going to advertise this? Word of mouth? Because I understand that this is probably not something that you're going to probably put open
correct.
for people to know, just, I mean,
Right.
for safety purposes or
Yep.
whatnot. So is it going to be primarily word of mouth or?
Yep, that's the plan. Originally, when I started the thought process behind this whole thing, I wanted to stick more towards archery because it is less of a hot topic. It's, you know, more family oriented, you know, a lot more people seem more comfortable with that sort of thing. But it is almost impossible to just get into archery because you have to be a big player with a lot of money.
Right.
And, you know, I myself and my family are pro-gun, I guess. I mean, we're not super wacky wild to one end or the other, but me and my dad both did hunter safety and things like that, so we're comfortable with it. And I don't want the entire neighborhood knowing I have guns in my house and coming over at all hours of the day. So my plan is to keep it more word of mouth, because I don't have the time, money, or employee base to be serving tons and tons of people.
So is this going to be a part-time position for you?
Yep. This is going to be part-time. At some point, maybe it'll be full-time, but I
Right.
highly doubt it.
So I really don't have a problem with this. When we have work done, we have to go to Tom's Guns in Waterloo. We had to leave Columbus. And then also my husband had some extensive work, and it was a home-based business like this. It was like Fitchburg. Because he needed to have some special work done. So I think this is actually a really good idea. From my perspective, I think this is a really good idea.
Can you define in general, what small miscellaneous firearm, hunting-related accessories you would be selling are?
Well, I guess, so the main reason I threw that in there, like I said, as my grandfather passed away, he had this mass of just odds and ends, various things that, you know, includes like firearm magazines, like clips, as some people would call them, flashlights, you know, things like that that could be mounted to a firearm, just little cheap things that I don't necessarily know that in the long term I would like to keep restocking. But those would be what would be offered for sale, at least initially, to just get them cleared out and gone.
You had mentioned consignment sort of activity, and so you'd be purchasing also along with the consignment?
Correct.
So you'd buy from a local,
Distributors.
Gun owner.
Yeah, or, yep.
okay, and then you would distribute that, resell that the correct way? Got it.
Yeah, the benefit of taking consignments is it, you know, alleviates the gun owner of the responsibility of disposition, because like I said, it's very difficult to do. And the only real good, safe way to do that is if you have an FFL and have access to background checks and things like that.
So to get the FFL is pretty extensive, correct? To get the background checks and
The process so far has actually been fairly easy, but I think I've just seen the tip of the iceberg on that. I mean, so far it's required me, I think it's a 5 or 6 page form you have to fill out. You have to get a photo of yourself and fingerprinted by local authorities. And that's kind of where my process has stopped so far, but I know there's a 3+ hour interview with a man in a suit that I'm sure is going to be terrifying. And there's probably going to be more background checks and things like that on myself, but so far it's been pretty reasonable.
And Kyle, a couple questions for you. All the neighbors have been notified?
Yeah, all the neighbors were notified by mailed letter. It was published as well, and we've had no comments.
If I could say, so I actually have spoken with a couple of my neighbors as of recently, and they claim that they haven't gotten any letters yet.
I can double check with Pat and see that that process, when it gets published, I believe they send the letters out at the same time, so I can double check on that.
Yeah. I mean, you said yourself, it's kind of a hot topic right now. I was a little surprised that there wasn't at least one person here to speak up about it in one way or the other, right?
Right.
So that was one question. And the other question for you, Kyle, the proximity of the Meister Park, is there any restrictions in the code or law that would prevent him from operating this business near a park?
I don't believe so. You really have to view this as a retail sales facility, essentially, or a service center. You know, you sort of have to move past that it's a gun or that it's bullets, because those are legal products. And I don't believe on the private property there's any restrictions on the possession or sale of those items for retail sale.
Okay, thank you.
So question for Kyle. For item 2, for the on-site sales limited, I'm not sure how to reconcile that if we're clearly going to, sell ammunition or other components, that are not consignment. I think that's less of a concern for mine, or, the gunsmithing is, the actual occupation and the production of stuff, whereas the other parts are just sales. And, and I can see there's some use for support sales, like, I can sell you this, I don't know, what else to make, I put the package together and you need, a couple of screws or whatever. But I don't know how to reconcile this regular sales, because here it says, sales are limited, and that's, the intent of this, the regulation.
That's sort of how I read it as well, is that And at the bottom, it even, under number 12, it mentions that garage and yard sales where you are bringing in a bunch of stuff and potentially trying to resell it. That's different, and that's its own kind of subsection. So I did want to point that out. I think it's a judgment call based on deliberation of the Plan Commission, but I do think it should be tightly kind of correlated, and so that it's not a small version of Gander Mountain where you're buying a bunch of stuff in just to resell, but that it is truly sort of being a product of what you're doing there. But there's no definition in the code, so this is an exercise in judgment for the Plan Commission.
Yeah, and I would agree with that analogy of, you know, the Gander Mountain part is, yeah, if it's just reselling stuff, that clearly just goes against the code there. I agree. I think there is a value to having a safe and, you know, responsible way to move firearms, you know, from people that don't want them and sell them. I think that part's valuable. I would be not in support of the ammunition sales. You don't need that. If you're just gunsmithing, you're fixing things and reselling, you know, that doesn't harm it. Yeah, so those would be my concerns for that part. And then the sign as well, because I'm thinking of the original one, Uriah, is part of the reason you had mentioned, Hunter, too, about not wanting your neighbors to know is, I think I'd entertain the same thing as not having a business sign. You know, that's in the code, but I'd say it'd be better not to have that. So I'd support some of the other restrictions that were put on the original, or the one in 2020, if appropriate for most of these.
Can I ask a little more about the ammunition part? So I am not a big hunter. I'm not a big gun guy, but I do happen to own a .351 Winchester that my grandfather gave me.
Really? I do too.
Yeah.
Son of a gun.
There you go.
What year?
Maybe we'll have to visit somebody in the future, but you can't get ammunition for it, right? They don't make it anymore. I got to save the shells and get them reloaded by somebody, et cetera. So it's not hard for me to believe that perhaps some of this could be hard to find, hard to get, not mass-produced ammunition. Is that, can you describe maybe some of that for me? I'm just poking around the edges because I don't know enough to know enough, but
As far as
as
selling
far as
ammunition?
what your vision for sales of ammunition would have been.
My vision would have been more standard ammunition, just because normally when people buy a firearm, they're like, hey, do you have any bullets? You know, just because they kind of go hand in hand. As part of the FFL process, you can get a different type of FFL that would allow me to sell reloaded or remanufactured ammunition. Personally, with my knowledge at this point, I would not feel comfortable doing that because I feel like, you know, that's a dangerous thing to do. And I also don't necessarily know that that's going to fit the criteria for a CUP permit as well, because I believe in there it says you can't store large quantities of flammable materials, so then you're kind of moving from one side to the other. So when I originally came up with this business idea, I was not entertaining the idea of reloading. But again, if, you know, Plan Commission says we don't want you to sell ammunition, you know, that's something I could also work with if need be, because I can definitely understand where you're coming from as trying to keep it consistent for each application. I agree.
Yeah, and my suggestion wasn't to say, well, why don't you do reloading? I was just trying to distinguish what your vision for the sales were. So what I'm hearing is it's more of a convenient point of purchase sale for somebody who's otherwise buying a firearm.
Correct.
Okay.
Because a private citizen could buy ammunition online probably for the same price I would be able to get it at, unless I buy massive quantities, which, again, being a one-person home-based operation it's not feasible.
So then you're not really tied to the ammunition part then?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, because I appreciate the extra type stuff, and for an example, if you have a scope on a gun and somebody doesn't want the scope, he can take the scope off and resell it for like $10 or $15 to somebody that needs it. So if you're not tied to the ammunition part, I think the safety and the liability kind of calms down a little bit.
Yeah, because we had concerns the last time too, is without some, very limited operations, it was concerning, and especially if you have, if there's no limit to the amount, maybe a friend of mine has literally 200 guns. If he decided he was going to get out of that business, would you have 200 in your garage? And standard garage security's not the greatest. With, loads of ammunition, that would not be something I would support, in a residential area. So without the ammunition part, which again, someone can get, I think that's okay. So the other question was, would there be a limit on these? And what we did last time, Uriah, was, it says in the previous one, there's a limit of 5 guns on site, because we were trying to figure out, like, how do you limit this thing? Is it, 1 visit per day? Is it 2 visits per day? Because we also didn't want to make that onerous on the neighborhood. And that was, the solution was, only 5 on site. You could deliver 5, and that would limit the operations. So is there, I assume that you've not probably wanted to entertain a limit because you'd like it to be successful, and you'd, like your wife to be in as well.
Right. I personally don't see there being much of a need to have, even a dozen seems like a stretch, because you're just not going to have that volume of customers and things, unless, of course, you do have someone that says, hey, I have a huge consignment. But, you could say, hey, give me these 5, and as they go. I don't really want to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in my garage, because I would much like to have my garage and my family's safety more than a successful business. So.
Right, because that's the part that makes it a big target, if you realize that,
Right.
Someone could make a big score by doing that versus a very limited operation.
Right, so essentially, if you had a family like mine, you'd potentially maybe have 8 to 10 in one, like if something happened to us, and my daughters wanted to get rid of our guns. It'd be 8 to 10. So if you had a limit of 12, then you probably would have to hold off having another contract or agreement with somebody until you sold the existing guns that you have already.
Correct. And I would imagine that turnover could be relatively frequent, depending on how much, word of mouth business you have, or if you took to online selling through Gun Broker, things like that. You can do a lot of volume that way, but again, that's not really my goal, is to be selling hundreds of guns a year.
You'd mentioned gunsmithing. What kind of operations would you do?
That is kind of an add-on as we move forward. At this current point, I don't feel comfortable doing any gunsmithing without certification, but it would be pretty generic things. I don't foresee there being a need in this sort of size of a community to be doing a ton of gunsmithing, but being able to do it well, accurately, and safely is a goal if that's something I did step into. But I think that is a very useful part to something like this, because, as Ms. Albright said, you're driving somewhere to go do something, or, you could take a gun to like Fleet Farm or something like that and probably get lackluster quality and things like that, which is kind of my goal, is to eliminate some of that.
I could see that going along with the operation. You pick up, a collection that was not taken care of, rusty, and you may need to refurbish them. So I could see that going along with this.
Correct.
Yeah.
You had mentioned previously that you were, your advertising would be word of mouth, and then I was going to ask you, well, where are you going to make your presence for sales? Word of mouth only, or you had mentioned then just later that, unless you went online, got some type of online presence. Is that in your plan? Like,
I would rather not go online, because you get into that whole nother hassle of, shipping firearms and doing all that sort of thing. I would rather have it be more of a face-to-face, being able to use, meet a person, kind of get to understand them, see what their, interests are, keep it more of a community-based thing, and then use the FFL tools that I have access to do background checks and things like that, versus, if I get guns brought to me and then put them online, ship them in a box to some FFL across the country, and then who knows where they end up. You're kind of back to the same situation as if that person sold them on their own.
And are you selling all sizes and shapes of guns? Would that be your intent?
That would be the current intent, yeah, unless otherwise directed.
Other questions, comments? Okay. If none, I'll entertain a motion.
I would like to put some conditions on it.
Well, before you do that, Brad, I want to make a comment. I'm a little uncomfortable moving forward, knowing that I don't know that these letters went to the neighbors. I mean, if you could confirm that.
And I would suggest that in the event the commission feels comfortable giving any approval, that it be conditioned on those letters being mailed out. And then if, for whatever reason, they didn't get mailed out, we would be bringing this back. We would be mailing them out and then bringing it back to the next commission meeting to have that hearing again, to make it legal through the CUP process.
And when would this, right now, this would go to council when, if we conditionally approved it tonight?
It would go on the 21st if those letters went out. If the letters went out, your approval would never kind of materialize, and it wouldn't go till, let's see, July 5th, and then July 19th would be the council meeting after your July 14th plan commission.
Okay. And then one other thought, and I'm sorry for cutting you off, Brad. One thing I would want to consider when we talk about any approvals is, just like we did for an Airbnb, we put a 1 year, come back and see me type of conditional, a review, 1 year review. So that's my 2 comments right now.
I'll piggyback on one of yours. So maybe not everybody here knows this, but a public hearing is a Class 2 notice, which means it has to run in the paper on consecutive weeks, and the second one has to be at least 7 days before the hearing. And typically, notices that have to get mailed to neighbors get sent out at the same time that first one runs. They don't typically get sent out certified mail, but what we often do to verify that something got sent to somebody is a clerk's affidavit that they got sent. So I would suggest that part of the motion be contingent on the clerk signing an affidavit that the letter was sent to these addresses.
That's fair.
What exception did you say? I'm just writing it down so I can remember.
Oh, we're ready to list through those things?
Okay, so Andy, you were the one with the exceptions?
Yeah. Just,
1 year.
I mean, we're going to put a 1 year conditional use, come back and see me on an Airbnb. I think it's just as pertinent to this situation as well. I think it's something we should consider for most things.
Yeah, and then the
Conditional
letters.
use permits are,
I think that's a little different, though.
okay.
The Airbnb, obviously, they're not changing anything in the building, they're not investing, where this gentleman is going to be turning his garage into a business. So if you were to pull that permit after that year, I don't think that'd be a service to the applicant. I don't know.
But what if during that year, the cops have had to go there 4 times? Or his business takes off and he's got, hey, I'm going to have more and more people here. Don't you want to kind of see how that is after a year? Because then it might have expanded and, hey, it doesn't belong in residential, it belongs in a commercial district now.
I'm okay with doing something like, let's get re-engaged, let's understand how things are going. Hopefully this thing takes off and he moves out of his house and he gets a storefront somewhere.
Right.
There's a few of them right down here.
Yeah, no,
That was the thinking last time too, was because we can't predict everything, we try to restrict it thinking forward, but we're going to miss something and we don't want to end up approving, something that disrupts the neighborhood, as well as we can kind of control it for that purpose. But a review, I would support that just to double check, see everything's fine, no big complaints.
If I could add to that, I think doing a re-up or a recheck-in is totally fine. Currently, there hasn't been any sort of changes done to the garage other than, some paint, facelifting things. There hasn't been any sort of very costly pieces of it. Obviously, the security cameras would be kind of expensive, but most people have those anyway. I'm sure I would love to have them regardless.
So you're not gonna purchase any like, sealed cases? Like a gun cabinet?
Those will be acquired as part of my grandfather's estate.
Oh, you already have, oh, you're gonna
Yep.
get them for free then? Yeah, because, I mean,
Very-
if you
very
want to keep,
cheaply,
you want to keep
yes.
rust-off guns, you need to put them in a gun cabinet.
Correct.
Preferably with a humidifier type thing.
Yeah, as far as, if an average person was starting this, it would be a lot more costly than what I'm currently doing, which is,
So it sounds to me like you're inheriting a lot of this and that you're trying to make a go of it from your grandpa's stuff then.
partially correct.
Okay,
Yep.
so it's a legacy.
Yep.
It's more of a legacy thing. Okay. For me, my only thing would be the ammo. I kind of agree not having, and the reason why that I say that is because if somebody finds out he has guns in his house and then he has the ammo to go with it, that's more of a trigger for somebody to get antsy and want to, break in or whatever.
Yeah, I think my feeling of that is that appears to be more of a danger to the neighborhood versus if there are only the firearms there and they're stolen, that's fine, not fine, but it's different versus, there's who knows how much, ammunition around there, yeah.
It wouldn't be an inherent risk then, I can understand that.
And, it's different if we're in a commercial area, that's legal and you'd have a more sophisticated security system. But yeah, just the residential area makes it much more sensitive. And honestly, you said you're not very far from Meister Park, that just doesn't sound good. Yeah, so to answer your question, I'd recommend the same list of restrictions that were on the original one for consistency. There's got to be consistency in these things, and unless there's some unusual, can't remember the term, but different circumstances. Extenuating, thank you, yeah. So, I think that fits to apply all of these. The security system needs to be maintained, a safe or secure location. That's a little wishy-washy, but, and then the 5 firearms, you could sell 5 a day, that's quite a few, as a limit.
Actually, that's actually how many you can have in possession.
Right.
So, but for an average person that has guns, you could, for the sake argument, you could say an average family that uses guns, they could have 10. So if that's one consignment, then he could only take half.
Right, and that's the difficulty. Otherwise, if we say 10, then the poor guy that came and got his first condition order is like, hey, wait a second,
Well, is he doing consignment though? I thought he was a gunsmith.
I was trying to remember back. I thought he was getting them shipped to him from elsewhere.
and then delivering them.
Yes,
I
yes.
believe that's correct.
And that there was also this component of, there was sort of 5 that this waiting for pickup at any given time was kind of a key phrase. I hope I'm remembering right, but I thought he could have others, just not like
That's-
fully ready and prepped for
That's how I'm
delivery.
reading this right now.
Right.
He can have 50 guns in there, but only 5 are available to be picked up. at
Oh,
one-
I gotcha.
at one day or
No,
at
okay.
one time.
Because I can imagine that there's all sorts of states of disassembly going on at any
Right,
given
and I thought
time.
I thought this read in possession, but I guess it doesn't.
I'm trying to remember, Brad.
Right, and I'm trying to remember that too, is,
Collaboratively,
because I think there was
Oh.
a concern about, you're going to have 5 or 6 cars just churning through
Okay.
this parking lot all the time. So that was part of the limit now that you're reminding me of, like, yes, you could have 5 cars show up sometime during that day.
Okay.
That's not too onerous for the neighborhood. Yeah, and I do not recall if there was any like on-site inventory limit. I'm not sure if it came up. It seemed like, he was just going to do, I order this in, fix it, package it, and I sell it. I mean, it didn't sound like a big production, but the problem is if we don't put the limit on it, it could be a big production. Where's the limit to make it, 200, 300, 500? There's
Right.
none.
I feel like 5 was kind of a product of his specific operation and how he was conducted.
much less community-based, as you were describing, Hunter, than, right. You're describing a community-based operation. He was I recall he was much more like online or at least shipped in from distance.
He's the middleman.
Yeah. and
Something
he-
like that, yeah.
so
It was like a special order.
It was
type of,
different. It was different, so. anyway.
Yeah, knowing that, I would be willing to change that to make it reasonable, to work with. But again, there should be some limit because, yeah, otherwise, there's none.
So,
I agree with the quantity limit. Go ahead.
well,
I had something else. to say.
No, my next comment was going to be, in this restriction, firearms must be kept in a safe or other secure location at all times, but there's no definition of what that is.
Right.
Please define that to me, and then,
Yeah, so I'll
sounds like
comment
it's going to
on-
be in a double locked door.
Right.
Is that safe and secure? Is that considered safe and secure to me, or is that could be different to Kyle or the Columbus Police Department? So that's or the FFL. Like, what is like? I need that definition.
Right. It sounded like the FFL had, your condition of licensure had some provisions for security.
Correct.
That also
I'm
kind
not
of-
sure what they are, though.
Oh, okay.
offhand.
All right. So since you're not sure,
It-
we
it
can't
could
be sure.
be-
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be each gun has its own individual trigger lock or whatever it might be. I guess what I'm thinking of is like, if you go into a Fleet Farm, you have double doors that lock that are mostly glass, and then in them, usually they're in a glass case with, I believe some of them that have trigger locks, some of them don't, I believe. But all of them that a customer could just come in and touch obviously have them because they sell ammunition as well. So,
They probably don't have the firing pin in there either.
I don't want to take this too lightly,
Right.
but between your licensure, your own personal interest in not having them stolen or otherwise misused, and kind of between those things, I think this language, while yes, it could be read generically, is okay here. That's my feeling.
If you look at this from the outside, if something happens, this is bad, and you say, why did we approve this thing? Then it takes a lot more scrutiny because, to my knowledge, a garage door is not very safe. It would not take minutes to get, even seconds to get past it. A deadbolt, same way. It really is, if it's a standard deadbolt from somewhere, it is not hard to get past.
Manufactured gun safes, though, they're extremely heavy.
Yeah.
And they are made, modern gun safes can't even be bored out anymore, to get into them. I mean, so the modern day, and I don't know how old your grandfather is, but the modern day safe is it providing it's locked, it has to be locked, obviously, it's a relatively safe place to
I'd be
store
comfortable with
guns.
a gun safe.
That's
Yeah.
my point. Is like it's not defined here, right? It doesn't say. It just says safe and secure.
Yeah, I would be more comfortable with a gun safe.
Right.
Like I said, the other
Right.
stuff is really not.
Right, like
difficult to get
specifying
around
that
at
it's a
all.
gun safe. Now, so proper storage is probably a gun safe and a trigger lock. And it would be proper, would probably be,
So we can specify that, that's not too onerous. You'll have a gun safe and you'll have trigger locks, so that doesn't seem to be, wouldn't inhibit your business.
And we say security system. He's talking about cameras. Are we talking about security cameras or a security system, which involves alarms and, glass breakage alarms, door entry alarms? Or are we just talking cameras?
my interest was cameras only in case something happened and that they had documentation. That was my only thought, was cameras.
Says security system. Doesn't say security cameras.
I was going to say, for our ring security cameras, we got the guys who, on tape, who were breaking in the cars all the time and looking right at the camera. They're still out there. So I think I would much better with if they had an alarm system.
I just want it defined. Like, I just want, what is a security system? What is a safe and secure location?
Did you have any contemplation to get in a considered security system, like, I don't know, ADT or whatever?
I hadn't looked into it. I'm kind of hesitant at this point as if this continues going this way, what the feasibility of this plan is going to be if I go all the way to like a security system with, you know, an extremely heavy fireproof gun safe that can't be bored and things like that. Because I mean, if you put a trigger lock on a gun in a fireproof safe, you're kind of getting away from anything that even resembles like a customer-based sales atmosphere, if that makes sense. So I mean, if we get to that plus a full security system through like an ADT, I think that I might be dead in the water at that point, because I'm guessing that would be extremely expensive.
To be fair, I wasn't suggesting that's required. I want it defined, like what we're asking for, right? Are you saying, because right here it says he needs a security system. I could interpret that as cameras, you could interpret that as something else, and you could interpret that as something else as well. So we just need to be clear, so he comes back in a year, it's reapproved for whatever, you know, and we don't have to question these things. You know, we've laid out all the criteria. There's no question. It is very vague.
Would it be enough to say an alarm system with cameras? You know, again, you know, you specify that one camera, is it a really good camera? You know, you can go down that rabbit hole. But I do agree, you know, I don't want it to be too wishy-washy, but, you know, I think I'd be comfortable with alarm system with cameras. I don't think they're horribly expensive. You know, we've been alarm systems in houses for 30, 40 years. And it's not, you know, it doesn't need to be an onerous one, but something when the garage door goes up, an alarm goes off, you know, something simple.
Yeah, they're definitely not as expensive as they used to be. There's like Simply Safe, you know, those are, you install those yourself. I mean, literally, I mean, you mentioned Ring, they do have a security system that's fairly cheap as well. $30 a month. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that. I mean, I'm not even saying you have to have a security, like, I just want a definition of what security system is, that's all.
So what did you guys think, so that's, the terminology is he's taking this from is the past one. What did you guys determine that was safe and secure?
We weren't as smart back then.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't here.
You know, and sometimes you say, okay, security system, we go, okay, that sounds good. You know, because you just, you know, you're thinking about a whole bunch of different stuff, you know, traffic and whatever it is, and, you know, and you don't go down the definitions of the security system.
Mm-hmm.
I have a security system in my house. It's a Blink camera and a Shih Tzu. So, right? That's my,
Yeah.
what's a security system? Let's just say you must have some type of,
Yeah, I wouldn't let the security system really scare you away, because I think you can get them at Costco for a couple $100.
You know, and it doesn't say here a remote monitored security system. It can be one.
Right.
I would say the wording I put in here is an alarm system with a camera. You know, then alarm goes off and you've got some record, because the concern would be if someone, you know, cases the joint, says, comes in, talks to you and goes, oh, wow, all I got to do is, you know, shimmy that door and I can sit here all day. But, you know, some of it is a little bit of a deterrent more than nothing.
So what about the guy that has this, though? I mean, is he going to have to come back and, you know, are we setting a precedent?
would have been smart if we put that year thing in there when they did that 2 years ago, but no.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, so essentially, you know, this is the terminology, the phrase now, and
For his system, that's what his requirements are, that, yes. So if we get another shot at that one, we'll be smarter, as Andy said.
Any other discussion? Do we want a minute to contemplate? You want a minute to contemplate how you're fashioning your motion, because I feel one coming out of you.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I'm good at fashioning them, but, you know, I go with the list we've got here. No ammunition sales,
Yep, 1 year.
1 year review.
Yep, 1 year, and the clerk's affidavit.
The one we kind of talked about a little bit was other sales. And again, you want to get away from the Gander Mountain type of thing, where you're just bringing stuff in and shipping it back out the door, which, you know, violates the regulations. But I agree, there may be incidental things. I've, you know, got a extra one of these things, you can sell that.
You're selling a turkey gun, it's got a red dot on it, and somebody doesn't want a red dot. You
Yeah.
take it off and sell it for $50.
So how do you limit that? Just say no stocked inventory, or I don't know how to say that. Incidental, is that does that make sense?
Miscellaneous inventory.
Reuse, resale.
That's good, that goes to the spirit of what you're trying to do. Yeah, I like that.
So that would limit any sort of, so I guess aside from firearms themselves, those are being allowed to be purchased through a distributor, but not other things, right? That's what we're kind of working towards, or nothing purchased from distributor, all private party consignment items.
I think the latter is more to the spirit of this. All pre-owned, right?
Okay.
Maybe is another way to put it, so.
To get away from the distribution model, like, I'm just gonna buy, you know, cases and cases of this stuff and sell it. Because that goes against the, you know, the restrictions of this here as a home-based business.
Well, you can buy pre-owned at a gun show though. So that's creating inventory.
I think that would limit it enough that I'd be comfortable. You can only buy so many pre-owned things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question I have is, so this 2020 application, they're able to have someone purchase third party and have things shipped to them? So that is also deemed acceptable, right? Like if, say for example, a customer buys something from Cabela's online or whatever, and it gets shipped to me because they can't have it shipped to them, that's deemed acceptable?
So in that scenario, why wouldn't they be able to have it shipped to them? That would be.
You would have, well, they would have to get it in person at a store. So like say they were looking for something that was kind of unique or limited, and say Cabela's in Missouri had it, and maybe they could ship it to Cabela's in Sun Prairie and then they could pick it up. But I don't know, let's just say, for example, they could ship it to any FFL and it comes to my door.
Oh, I see
They
what you're
could come to
saying.
me
Is
to
that a
pick it.
thing?
Yeah.
People that have FFLs, they receive merchandise from out of state?
Correct.
Because
I'm
of
assuming that's what,
crossing lines of state lines and whatnot?
right. I'm assuming that's what the 2020 candidate does a lot of, is like drop shipping, so to speak. People must buy from somewhere out of driving distance, have it shipped to the FFL, which is then able to do the check to give them.
So would you do a background check on them also then?
You have to, yeah.
Okay, so it wouldn't be a situation where I'm a felon, I can't own something, you would actually have to do a background check on that person before you would take that weapon?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
There's a
Of
personal
one-
checkpoint on both ends of the shipping,
Yep.
is what it
Okay.
is.
An FFL can ship to another FFL as long as they have documentation of each person's license. And they, you know, Postal Service or FedEx or whatever acts as a medium where it's all tracked from point A to B, but it can't go to a private citizen's.
But that final delivery is in person.
Correct, with a
I
background
wouldn't
check
have a problem with
required.
that. I mean, it'd be safer than having them send it to their Uncle Jim.
Right.
You know, who knows what Uncle Jim is gonna do with
And
it.
that's not a case where that's not a case where what we're trying to get away from is like where you're purchasing in bulk, breaking it down and reselling.
Right.
Right. These are all individual pieces, either, yeah.
Right, and
Yes,
that
to
gets
answer
to
your
more of
question,
a,
yeah, that's.
it
I
gets
think-
more of a service,
Yes.
you know, like the gunsmithing if you do that, but it's,
Right.
versus just distribution sales, yeah.
Right.
You're providing a service as this middleman to do a check. Yeah, I'm more comfortable with that. Again, to keep it limited until you grow, hopefully you do, and then, you know, buy a storefront downtown, yeah.
Yeah, because the traffic thing that was discussed, you might have 50 guns there, but only 5 could be picked up during the day. I mean, that's just going against that whole traffic thing as they're coming in the front door for the scope or the sling or the case. The more traffic, it would generate more traffic. But for him to sell it on that pickup, I don't think that would be, like you say, have it limited. It's not like you've got a storefront where you got everything on the racks and people come in and buy stuff.
Right, because if somebody's picking, if he's got an extra case and somebody, somebody has a deer rifle shipped to him and he has a case to sell to him for whatever.
Yeah, that would be more of like incidental sales, but I
Right.
guess I don't know how. I mean, obviously you'd be very limited as to how much of that you could do, because if I did, only consignments or whatever, unless somebody gives me 20 cases, I mean, I'll sell that one case and then the next 10 people that come in are like, hey, you have a case? Then I wouldn't have one. But I totally understand not wanting to have 50 people coming to my house a week to buy something that
Well,
they
you would
could
have,
get it.
in theory with that, he would have to stock stocks so that you
Right.
can legally transport a gun in the state of Wisconsin. Has to be cased.
That's changed.
Oh, has it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's,
I don't really fly by those rules. I like to put my stuff in a case, but
You can have a weapon in a car without a case anymore?
as long as it's unloaded.
Really? What, are we living in the West?
it
I had no
kinda
idea.
Pretty much.
was under Walker.
No comment.
Didn't know that.
So do we need to wrap these up and restate them for Kyle?
Yeah, it's gotta be specific, right? Kyle can't
Matt,
get-
when
Kyle
Matt
can't guess
delivered
at what we want.
cupcakes, he would also wordsmith for us.
I can repeat what I have so far.
Okay.
1 year, it will be valid for 1 year with a revisit to the Plan Commission for review. No ammunition sales. Only this approval is contingent on the clerk's affidavit of mailing of the letters. Firearms, I believe this is still in there, firearms stored with trigger locks in a safe,
Gun safe.
a gun safe.
Yeah.
A security system with camera must be maintained for the premises.
I would alter that to, say, alarm system with camera.
Alarm. And then there's this 5 firearms waiting for pickup at any given time.
I think that still works, right?
Yep, as long as he can have inventory of whatever.
Yeah, so that doesn't limit his inventory, which could be 200, but
Is your vision of this home-based business to have, when you walk in your garage, you have these guns on display in display cases? Or like, what's your vision of the inside of this garage? We never really talked about that. And when you're talking about keeping everything in a gun safe with a trigger lock on it, how can he, unless he's doing this business like online or something, he's gonna have to go in and open a safe every time, pull out a gun. Hey, do you like this gun? No. How about this gun? I'm
That's how they
saying that
do it,
we're
though.
severely limiting that.
Yeah.
If it's always have to be in a safe, I would say during non-business hours, it should be stored
thank you.
in a.
You're thinking like me, Andy, that's exactly where I was going. was,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Storage, we could change
You know what I'm
that
saying?
to
Like,
storage outside
during
of
the day,
business hours.
Guns everywhere. But at night, when you're not there, locked, or whenever you're outside of business hours, should be in a safe, secure location.
Correct. Excellent. Just what Andy said. That's why we brought you.
Not to make it more wordy, but does there need to be like specifications on safe? Like, are we talking concrete filled?
I would say no.
I think an average gun safe that you
Like
can buy
metal
at Cabela's
cabinet?
is fine.
glass display, is that acceptable, or is that only during business hours? Like, put them in something else?
Yeah, I don't think a glass display unless it's like bulletproof glass, but I think the spirit of it would be a gun safe of, you can make one up, but just, something reasonable. Again, the appearance of security is just as valuable.
Right.
But yes, if they're just in a glass case with one of those little locks in there, that obviously wouldn't cut the
That basically
spirit of
is
this.
just prevents them from getting dusty.
Right.
Right, yeah.
I think that's reasonable.
And a Shih Tzu, I think, was the other
I can run
important part.
You're gonna have to get a dog, apparently.
Yeah.
A little Shih Tzu.
Be a little dog.
Don't write that down, Kyle.
Don't write that.
No, I'm glad my wife isn't here to hear that. She wants a dog bad.
No business sign,
Yeah.
Right.
also.
I mean, everything else, I agree with the spirit, we need to be consistent, but we also have to look at the past and see if we can make improvements on what,
Right.
commissions have done in the past and what's safe and what's right for, our ever-changing world.
Yeah. And the resale, Uriah's wise words, resale something,
Reuse, resale,
thank you.
/ pre-owned.
That,
So,
Mike.
the sales would be limited to reuse and resale of pre-owned items?
unfortunately, that limits the one thing where somebody may ship it in for him to deliver it. That
Right.
limits him.
Is there a name for that?
That would be like an FFL transfer.
Okay,
Perfect.
yeah.
Thank you.
I think those should be allowable.
Because really what you're selling there is the service,
Right.
not the item.
But then the reuse resale limits it to some reasonable inventory. It's not just
Right.
ship, the truck pulls up, pull out the forklift and fill his garage up.
If you wanted to set a maximum gun limit for moving forward, I'm open to that also, since that was kind of a gray area too.
Yeah,
I
on
mean, if you
site,
wanna just
because
limit it
and
to
that does help specify, when we wrote this before, our wisdom was limited, but, waiting for pickup was 5, that limited the traffic. But sure, on site, there's no limit right now.
Right.
Again, it could be 200.
Or 20, if you have just a couple people that have given you your gun, given them your guns or whatever.
Right.
So what's you're saying 10 collection,
Because
standard.
I mean, not that we could easily give somebody 10 guns, and we're 2 people. So,
I mean, I'm fine with 20 to give you room to move things around without having to get off-site storage, because that would be not as secure, I would hope. Any other thoughts for numbers?
To me personally, it's all dependent on the requirement of the safe, right? So if he's got a safe for 12 guns,
right, that's a good point.
that's what he's gonna have.
And if he's got safes for 50 guns,
I mean, I don't think that we should restrict it. I mean, whatever he can afford and whatever he can secure. I mean, do you have a limit in mind that you would like?
If it was under those circumstances, I feel as though 50 would be a lot. But I think you could probably get a 50 gun safe or a couple of 25s or whatever, and that would be
Right.
somewhat reasonable. Past that, I think is kind of,
So the condition of security becomes its own practical
Right.
limitation on quantity.
So,
whatever can be secured securely, or,
from looking at this from the outside, if we approve this and say, this guy can store 50 guns on his property, does somebody come back and look at us and go, what the hell did you do? Where is that on that gauge? Understanding that the private guy next door could have 200 in his private collection
right.
also. So
I guess
I'm
that's
okay
part of
with, I'm
stepping
okay with
into the-
50, to put a number on this, I would say. Because the difference is the private guys doesn't have people usually walking in and out constantly,
Right.
viewing this and seeing this,
Yeah.
and it's not as advertised. Right, are you thinking a lot?
I don't have any strong feelings one way or another on that.
Okay.
I mean, this all seems
Right.
Okay.
I think for me personally, it's the number of guns you can store safely. So if he's got 5 cases that he can put 10 guns in each, to me, that seems reasonable.
So are you thinking put a number on or put no number
No,
on?
I'm saying as long as he can store as many guns as he has safely, and based on the requirement, I think that should be fine. That's my personal opinion.
I'd like to put 50 on it if you don't think it's onerous on the business, you know, and honestly, if you're gonna come back and review in a year, you can go, you know what? It just doesn't work because I got all these people that are really popular with me and they all have 51 gun collections. You know, we change it.
Yeah, I think a limit of 50 is less detrimental than some of the other restrictions that I think are also reasonable. So I mean, 50 doesn't seem like a problem.
Okay.
And then it kind of goes together, but all of the requirements in 114-106 that talks about like, you know, you can't have more than 12 arrivals and 12 departures per day. Those, regardless of what you say, those still are in effect. But I do think it's nice to put them in as a condition, just because it highlights that if you start having 50 visits a day, now you've violated a condition versus just violating an ordinance. And that can go to the heart of the matter then.
Kyle, can you remind me, a conditional use permit, does that expire with the sale of the home, or that's good for that property forever?
It runs with that property forever, I believe, unless you discontinue it for more than 365 days. But yeah, the approval that we gave with no time limit could run for decades or for eternity.
I would like to add a condition that where it's valid, after the 1-year review, it would be valid until the sell of the house, because
Expires on like transfer or sale of the property.
or whatever, yeah. I mean, that's just something that should be done for, no matter if it's a pet grooming or gun sales or an Airbnb, right? I mean, these things shouldn't be in perpetuity with the property
Usually the
forever.
discontinuation sort of takes care of that, but
Okay.
if we're tying up loose ends, let's do it.
And so much of this is kind of circumstantial and based on how you feel about the applicant and his plan, and if it's a different applicant or, not the same applicant,
Right.
I think it's very reasonable to want them to come back before this
Right.
body.
All right, you have the list.
All right, let me go over it again. Firearms must be stored in a gun safe with trigger locks during non-business hours. All requirements of 114-106 must be met. An alarm system with camera must be maintained for the premises. Applicant can hold no more than 5 firearms waiting for pickup at any given time, or did we move away from that?
I don't think we moved away from it. I
Okay.
think it was
No, that's still good.
Right,
still
I
just
think it's the
maintaining the
traffic,
consistency
the
of that,
cars.
the traffic, yeah.
All right, no business signage at this location. The sales are restricted to the reuse, resale of pre-owned items and FFL transfer sales.
Yep.
Limit of 50 guns. The conditional use permit would expire upon transfer or sale of the property. We need a clerk's affidavit for the mailing. 1 year, this will require a revisit to the Plan Commission, and no ammunition sales.
1 year from the date of council approval.
One year after council approval, is that what you said?
Yeah. All right, now, we've apparently got a motion now, all we need is a sponsor.
So we have a,
So,
do you want to make your motion
does that
again?
sound like your motion?
Yes. Thank you.
Alder Albright will second it.
Thank you, Kyle. I couldn't
Any-
say that all in one breath.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of recommending such to the council for approval signify by aye.
Your Honor, I'd like to make it a big roll call, please.
Very good, roll call vote is requested. Kyle?
All right, Tylen,
Nay.
Traxler.
Nay.
Myers.
Yay.
Albright.
Yay.
Monday.
Yay.
Baston.
Aye.
All right. Just to clarify, Traxler and Tylen were nay, not yay?
Correct.
Okay. And everyone else was in the affirmative?
For.
Okay.
For approval.
So that motion does carry.
Great.
So,
Thank you. Thanks for standing there for an hour.
No problem.
All right.
so next steps, the most important thing will be, from the administrative perspective, the clerk's affidavit. If that, we don't have an affidavit, we can't prove that the things were mailed, you will see this back on the agenda on July 14th. And we'll have this typed up with all of the conditions that we talked about tonight. So in case there are any changes, we would be able to reconsider them after that public hearing in the event that needs to happen.
Right, that, it's not, if that didn't happen, it's not just a mailing, it has to be a public hearing again, correct?
Correct, it would be
Right, yes,
another
okay.
public hearing,
Right,
but the mailing.
Because this one would have been a no-go, basically.
Yes.
Good, thanks. Okay, you'll keep Mr. Frank informed of that outcome and the dates of the council meeting. Okay. Great. We've made it to number 9. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Traxler and Bastion. All those signify favor by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.